Hello everyone, I'm John, and we are continuing our reading of The Artist's Way for Parents by Julia Cameron. All right, an exercise, the 72 pickup. Growing up, when the mess got out of hand, it was time for a game my mother called 72 pickup. It consists of children putting the toys away in 72 seconds while the adult counts out the tempo. With 7 Cameron children, there was 7 times the mass and 7 times the frenzy as we threw toys and art supplies into our designated trunks. Take a cue from Dorothy Cameron and try the 72 pickup game with your child. This works regardless of how many children or how many toys you are dealing with. Count backwards from 72 to 0 and allow yourself and your children a sense of play and accomplishment in this race against the human clock. A room of their own. Although Virginia Woolf suggests that all artists need a room of their own, not all of us have the extra space to achieve this. But it's worth pursuing for ourselves and our children, and we can create these special areas, however small they might be, inspired by safety, magic, and ideas. As we clear clutter, we find that we have more room, physically and psychologically. And just as we need to have room enough for our creative endeavors, our children need to have space of their own. It's important to designate an area that is strictly our children's. Teresa, a young mother in England, exposed her daughter to the Flower Fairy books at a young age. Together they would pore over the pictures, reading the stories, and making up their own. In the garden, they would point out the different flowers and muse over which flower fairy existed magically within each one. When the family moved to Germany, much was new for Teresa's daughter. They could bring only their most valuable possessions with them, and they chose the cherished items carefully when they picked up their things. When they got to their new home, Teresa watched as her daughter carted her Flower Fairy book everywhere with her, clutching it tightly on car trips and turning its pages as she sat in the corner of their new living room, where everything, including the language spoken around them, had changed. Teresa was suddenly struck with an idea. There was a cubbyhole in a large walk-in closet in their new house. What if she were to make it a special place for her daughter? Remembering how much she had loved the secret compartments built into the walls of the house she had grown up in herself, she wallpapered the cubbyhole with Flower Fairy wallpaper, added a small chair and a Flower Fairy lamp, and hung a Flower Fairy curtain as a doorway that could be closed if her daughter wanted privacy in her secret space. Her daughter, now grown, still remembers the thrill of having a room of her own, turning on the lamp and seeing the fairies illuminated. It felt like it was all real. It was a magical place where flower fairies lived. I would read my book or sit there with my stuffed animals or my cat. The little room was rich with possibility and fantasy. To this day, I have wonderfully fond memories of those books, and cozy spaces always speak to me. Giving our children the gift of space and adding even the simplest touch to make that space truly theirs, we give our children room to imagine, to dream, and to become themselves. Creating space that is habitable and inviting helps everyone. And we can look for areas of our homes that might be improved for our own benefit as well. And when we take care of ourselves in this way, the happy byproduct is that it also helps our children. For almost a year, my terrace has been basically unusable, says Jen, calling long distance from Miami. It is the first I have heard of her having a terrace. I tell her as much. I know, Jen. Jen laments. We have a great grill out there, which is great, and my husband uses that, but there's a huge table filling up practically the whole space. It gets crowded as soon as two people are out there, and the tiles, chairs, and table are filthy. It's basically kind of dirty storage unit in view of the street. I asked Jen what she thinks it would take to bring it to a more usable condition. Well, probably just a bucket of hot soapy water and a sponge, a little elbow grease, she admits. We need a smaller table, but the huge one folds in half and could be stored off to the side. I let her know that the project, in fact, doesn't sound very large. What would happen if you spent 15 minutes on this? I asked her. I'll try it, Jen says. I didn't have any plans for the next 15 minutes anyway, she laughs. What was I going to do? Check my email, browse the internet? I'm turning on the hot water and getting the bucket out now. I'll call you back in 15. I smile to myself as I hang up the phone, knowing full well that the progress she will make in that window will astonish and relieve her. In 12-step jargon, there is talk of progress, not perfection. This is a good mantra for us as well, as we guide our creative children and attend to the creative children in ourselves. A little goes a long way. That means a little praise, a little encouragement, a little down on hands and knees scrubbing. It is far harder and more painful to be a blocked artist than it is to do the work. It is far harder and more painful to try to look the other way every time we pass the terrace window, wincing and feeling discouraged, than it is to fill the bucket with water and clean it up. Incremental progress adds up much faster than we would assume. The pain of not taking this small step is far more destructive to our psyche and productivity than just being willing to take a few minutes and toss a few things out or make a space habitable. One thing leads to the next, and letting go of the unwanted makes way for the new and surprising. My phone rings again, and it's Jen. First of all, it's hotter than blazes out there, she tells me. I already hear the levity in her voice. Well, good. You're well into grilling season then. Perfect timing. And I have to tell you that the scrubbing is a bit of a workout, Jen goes on. Good, I say. You like to work out. To say that she is a fitness enthusiast is a vast understatement. There is hardly a day when she doesn't surf, swim, or lift weights. Jen laughs. Fair enough. But here's the thing. I started scrubbing, and it was really, really dirty out there. The tiles were literally black, but I realized a few things. Let's hear them. First of all, if you had asked me what color my tiles were, I would have told you gray. They're white, she says, chuckling. Second, 15 minutes is significant. You can get a lot done. I even want to do another 15 minutes when I hang up because I realized I have a terrace. I'm lucky. It's beautiful. I have an ocean view, and I had literally shoved a bunch of clutter between me and the reason I bought the apartment. I listen, feeling for her, and now she continues, I know exactly what to do with my short story that I was stuck on. I'm going to finish cleaning the terrace, set my daughter up with her drawing pad next to me, and sit out there with my laptop with an unobstructed view of the Atlantic and write. Each tile I scrub helps sort out my storyline, and my daughter keeps yelling, water, water. I've been blocking the view from her too. I'm thrilled to hear her clarity and excitement, and not surprised. Over and over, my students have excuse me. Over and over, my students have reported not only physical but also creative breakthroughs they have had almost immediately upon clearing clutter and husbanding their space. Using the space we have, we literally make room for our ideas. Creating a room of our own, however small, we are inspired to take action in large ways as well. An exercise, a room of your own. Taking a cue from Teresa and Jen, look around your home and see if there is a place that could become sort of a creative haven for you or your child. Ideally, you can create one for each of you. Allow the space to be small. If square feet are an issue, it is the quality, vibrancy, and thoughtfulness of the space that matters more than the size of the space itself. Misunderstanding messiness. Children love mess, and it's important that we allow them to create chaos. The child who is over-controlled is a child who misses the glee of play. Artists of any age love to play. Play is messy. For all of us, the part of us that creates is our own inner child. We may be tired of hearing about the inner child, but as we observe our children and reflect on ourselves, we recognize the part of ourselves that is also youthful, playful, and uninhibited by outer limits or rules. Giving our inner artist as well as our child room to be messy is freeing and unleavening for all. Angie's California home is sleek and bright. A modern house with clean lines and new amenities. She bought it recently with her young family, and upon moving in, she realized she was trying to preserve the perfection in a way that was frustrating herself, her husband, and her young son, Richard. I love the shininess of it when we moved in, says Angie. I've never lived in such a new place or had such modern appliances. I wanted to keep it just like new. But with 3-year-old Richard and a busy lifestyle, this was not a realistic possibility. A quest to maintain perfection is actually a blocking technique because we can never ever be perfect. The obsession with chasing perfection can effectively block other more creative ideas that wish to bubble to the surface. Striving for perfection, while it may sound noble, is actually a cleverly disguised technique for closing the door on our creativity, and, by extension, that of our child. Angie quickly saw that she was not going to be able to maintain perfect order in her home, and even if she could, it would not be the most joyous use of her time. At first, I was cleaning up after everyone all the time. I resented my son for scattering toys everywhere, and I resented my husband for leaving a wet towel in the bathroom or a dish in the sink. Before I knew it, I was a martyred wife. I never thought I even had that side of myself. Angie's story is a common one. Rather than listen to the inklings of creative desires in herself, she focused on the handprint on the refrigerator or the crooked book on the bookshelf. Entire days would pass when she had done nothing but clean up. On those days, she fell into bed exhausted and unsatisfied. I felt like I wasn't doing anything with myself, she complained, and in fact, she was right. When we fall into the trap of spending our days attempting to correct all superficial imperfections, be they imperfections in our surroundings or in our bodies, we are indeed not doing anything with ourselves, because we are all creative. We all have daily creative urges, large and small, that left unattended will fester into sadness and resentment. I urged Angie to try a simple exercise. Fill in the blank, 5 minutes. I told her, if it weren't too messy, I'd try blank. Annie started to fill out her list. At first, she found didn't really surprise her. If it weren't too messy, I'd let Richard take over the kitchen table with his finger paints. If it weren't too messy, I'd encourage my husband to do more grilling. He loves to grill. But as Angie continued, her own wishes started to emerge. If I weren't too busy, I'd plant a new batch of flowers in the front garden. If it weren't too messy, I'd think about getting my own oil paints back out and fooling around with them again. Angie was shocked to learn that much of what was waiting to be set free was her own creativity. Planting flowers, painting. These things that Angie had deemed less important than raising a family in a perfectly clean and ordered house. I urged Angie to experiment just a little bit with allowing herself and her family some messiness and to get back to me with what she found. First of all, she reported, Richard absolutely loved the finger painting project. I haven't seen him so happy, or actually so focused, in quite a while. I couldn't believe how long he was occupied with the paints. Even more shocking was that it took only a few minutes to clean up when he was done. I was so scared of making a mess that I had become afraid to start anything. I had a completely unrealistic, fear-based expectation of what it would take to clean up. And so the next day I got his paints out again, and this time I got my own out too. I think we might start painting together every day. I was thrilled to hear that Angie was indulging in something of her own alongside Richard. What could be better for Richard, I thought, than a mother modeling the creative giddiness of painting beside him? Certainly not a mother who's worried about cleaning up was palpable. Our children notice that what we do and feel, and that includes the unspoken worry about cleaning up the mess that is being created. Exposed to a parent who is also willing to play with paint, willing to fool around with colors and shapes. Richard's creativity is bound to no limits. Richard can also learn to help clean up with his things and, more important, learn that it is worth starting something even if it will make a mess. If we are unwilling to ever make a mess, we are teaching our children that we are unwilling to start projects, unwilling to try new things. As we model the excitement of play in an artistic endeavor and the willingness to clean up without drama or resentment, we are showing our children that they too can experiment, and that beginning a project is something to be eagerly anticipated instead of avoided. An exercise: make a mess. Make a mess with your child. When you are done, time the cleanup. You may be surprised at what an impact only 5 minutes can make. By jumping right into cleanup, you are showing your child and yourself that mess is not threatening or an imaginary creative block. It is part of a thrilling process in which you can both play free. Respect. We teach our children to say please and thank you as we model these behaviors ourselves. If we are genuine and gracious with the bus driver, our children learn to do the same. If we are honest and generous in our communication with our spouse, our children learn that too. Children mimic what we do and absorb it. If we set boundaries with kindness, our children learn that boundary setting is okay. If we are impatient or judgmental, our children learn to emulate that as well. No parent is perfect, and no child has even a day of perfect behavior. But if we are conscious, if there is one thing that we can be guaranteed of as parents, it is that our children are watching us. They are learning from what we do, positive, negative, or indifferent. And suddenly our behavior choices are very important. As we model and coach our children to have respect for and be kind to others, we teach them to behave in society in a way that will help them make friends and allies in the world. Most of us have a good sense of how to do this. When Domenica was little, I worked hard at instilling manners. What do we say? I would ask her when she would make a request. She soon learned please. What do we say? I would ask her when I performed some task on her behalf. She learned to say thank you. These simple niceties stood her in a very good stead. When she would go to play at a friend's house, she took her manners with her, and I was often complimented on her amenities. Soon enough, Dominica had learned not only the correct answers, but also the cues. I would overhear her playing, teaching what she had learned to her dolls and stuffed animals. Her young friends quickly picked up Domenica's rules. "I want the dolly, please," I would hear them say. Domenica's teachers were often appreciative of her decorum. "Dominica has good manners," I would hear at a parent-teacher meeting. And I think we'll go ahead and stop there briefly. I have to go work in a gallery and hang a show, and we'll pick back up when I get back. Now that Dominica is grown, her manners have grown along with her. Please and thank you are never out of style. We are more creative when we feel respected. My friend Max, an art teacher, says that in classroom, respect is the only rule that matters. It's about mutual respect, he says. Sometimes teachers try to command respect by putting students down, instilling fear or intimidating them, but I don't think that really works. My philosophy is to treat them as I'd like to be treated, with warmth, politeness, kindness, and humor, and to never ask them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. Is it a surprise that Max is beloved among his students and has many times won the title of Teacher of the Year? It's not always easy, though, to maintain this dynamic from the outside. Max seems to have an effortless, warm control of his classroom, and I tell him as much. "Don't you ever disagree with your students?" I ask him. "All the time, every day, countless times," he smiles. But I think it's very important for them to know that we're not always going to get along. A father, as well as a teacher, Max says that his home and classroom life have certain similarities. There's a time and place for "because I said so," he tells me. Sometimes as a teacher or parent, you do know what is right for the child, whether it feels fair to them or not. In the long run, it all works out. In the moment, there's sometimes some turbulence, but it's important not to get into a negotiation in these moments. I think when we allow a child to negotiate in a way that is not respectful, we are teaching them to be manipulative people. It's important to keep an eye on that. Basic human respect and common courtesy are lessons we must be willing to teach, and good behavior is something we must be conscious to model. Whether it is for our immediate family, an elderly neighbor, the person working at the grocery store checkout, or a close friend, a doctor, a lawyer, a painter, or a filmmaker, every person deserves our respect, regardless of class or socio-cultural norms. Every person we encounter deserves our warm hello and our acts of kindness. As we demonstrate good manners in the world and also in relation to speaking about creativity in the world, our children mimic and emulate our behavior. Demonstrating a respect for artists and creative urges, we acknowledge the creativity in ourselves and others. Treating others as we wish to be treated ourselves, our children learn to do the same. And as we and our children reach out to the world with warmth, the world often reaches back in kind. An exercise: appreciating respect. List 5 ways you appreciate being treated. If your child is old enough, ask him or her to do this exercise as well. Examples: I appreciate when someone listens to me without interrupting. I appreciate the stranger who smiles and says good morning when we pass on the street. I appreciate someone seeing the positive in what I have done. Now do that 5 times. Now find an opportunity today to treat another person with thoughtful kindness as you would wish to be treated yourself. And we are going to stop there because that is the end of chapter 4. All right. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you.